The legacy OS, religious frameworks. In the conscious phase shift, religion is not viewed as a theological truth or a myth, but as a legacy operating system. For millennia, this was the primary antivirus used to manage the human status alarm. The connection. The universe is inherently noisy and chaotic. This creates a massive, constant status threat to the human ego. Am I significant? What happens when my hardware fails? Religion provides a hard-coded priority script that claims to answer these questions. It tells the individual they have infinite status in the eyes of a creator, effectively silencing the amygdala's fear of insignificance. The mechanics. It functions as a social firewall. By joining a faith, the individual aligns their frequency with a tribe. This creates a unified signal that lowers internal friction. However, because this OS is legacy, based on ancient data, it often struggles to process new data, scientific discovery, leading to a system conflict where the user rejects the ultimate truth to protect the comfort of the old script. The certainty resource, religion, and the atheist's sting. In the laboratory, we don't argue about the existence of God. We look at the utility of belief. The religious signal. For many, religion provides a high-density status shield. It offers a community, a clear moral hierarchy, and a sense of cosmic importance. It lowers their internal noise by providing answers that fit their narrative. The hardcore atheist's sting. When an atheist feels hate toward a believer, it is often a jealousy of certainty. The logic. You are doing the hard work of thinking for yourself, facing the void without a safety net, and following the data. The friction. When you see someone else taking the easy way out with a scripted faith, your brain registers a fairness violation. You feel they are cheating the reality of existence, and your anger is an attempt to correct their status by proving them stupid or wrong. The clinical indifference. The open-minded state you've reached is the advanced calibration. You no longer need to defeat the believer to validate your own intellect. The realization. You realize that their belief is just their way of managing their own status alarms and resource leaks. The result. You can sit at a table with someone of any faith and feel zero friction. You aren't agreeing with them. You are simply observing their legacy OS at work. You've reclaimed the energy you used to spend on hating and redirected it into your own ultimate truth. A person who is truly certain of their own calibration has no need to scream at the person who is misaligned. The binary loop, right versus wrong, media culture. Mainstream media and social algorithms operate by exploiting the binary logic of the primitive brain. This is the ultimate resource leak of the modern era. The connection. The brain is biologically wired to categorize data into safe or threat. Media outlets have deduced that high noise generates high engagement. By framing every issue as a binary choice, right versus wrong, us versus them, they trigger a constant phase interference in the public consciousness. The mechanics, a feedback loop. When the media tells you that the other side is a threat to your status or your resources, your amygdala fires. You then seek out data that confirms your rightness, the ego feed. The media provides this synthetic status, making you feel superior to the wrong side. The result. This is a coordinated sabotage of the collective signal. It keeps the population in a state of lower frequency tribal warfare. Instead of achieving super-radiance, solving global problems, we are stuck in an infinite loop of trying to prove the other data point is a glitch. Once you see that a news cycle is just a status trigger designed to harvest your attention, the alarm stops working. You move from a state of reaction to a state of utility. You ask, is this data useful for the ultimate truth, or is it just noise designed to feed my ego? The overall goal isn't to destroy religion or fix the media. That's just more friction. The goal is to observe the loop. The identity war. Status signaling in gender and politics. When we look at the friction between conservative/conformist groups and LGBTQ+/liberal groups, we aren't looking at a moral conflict. We are looking at a frequency clash fueled by the prime mover jealousy. The conformist friction, the jealousy of autonomy. The conservative or right-wing framework often relies on a legacy OS of conformity. It provides safety through predictable status hierarchies, tradition, gender roles, established norms. The deduction. When a conformist encounters someone who lives outside those norms, such as a trans or non-binary individual, it triggers a status alarm. The root. The conformist has paid the price of conformity. They have suppressed their own chaotic desires to fit the script of free will while actually following a rigid social manual. The sting. Seeing someone else claim the freedom to define their own identity feels like a cheat code. The brain registers this as, why do they get to ignore the rules I have to suffer under? This manifests as transphobia or bigotry, which are actually just desperate attempts to manually reimpose the legacy OS on someone else to protect the value of the conformist's own investment in the rules. The liberal friction, the jealousy of power. The liberal or progressive framework often operates from a position of disrupted status. The deduction, the liberal side observes the legacy OS, holding onto the levers of power, legal, financial, and institutional. The root, this creates a resource threat. The anger directed at conservative parties is often fueled by a jealousy of the stability and influence those parties wield. The sting, when the liberal side sees the power side making rules that restrict their autonomy, the amygdala fires. The hate directed back is a counter-sting, an attempt to devalue the status of the traditionalists to level the playing field. The imaginary good versus evil loop. Both sides use high-noise language, words like bigot, sinner, sexist, or woke, to avoid looking at the core deduction. The reality. These are just labeling scripts. If you can label the other side as evil, you don't have to address your own jealousy of their position or their freedom. You move from a status conflict to a moral crusade, which feels much better to the ego. The result. This is a zero-sum power struggle. Neither side is seeking the ultimate truth. Both are seeking status dominance. One side wants the status of moral authority, conformity, while the other wants the status of moral autonomy, freedom. Deduction. The conscious phase shift in culture. A person who has achieved a conscious phase shift looks at this war and sees two groups of people with their status alarms stuck in the on position. To the trans individual, you see that the hate coming at you is actually a confession of the other person's lack of freedom. To the traditionalist, you see that the attack on your values is actually a reaction to your perceived power. The solution. You stop being a data point in their war. You recognize that bigotry and anger are just the sounds a machine makes when its gears are grinding. By seeing the jealousy at the core, you dismantle their power over your peace. Now, if jealousy is a resource leak, then jealousy about jealousy is a feedback loop that causes the entire system to overheat. In the conscious phase shift, we call this secondary interference. It's when the brain isn't just reacting to a threat, but reacting to the reaction itself. The contagion, metastatic jealousy. Jealousy is not a closed system. It is a frequency that, once emitted, forces everyone in the radius to recalibrate their own status alarms. The metasting, being jealous of someone's peace. This is the most common form of jealousy about jealousy. The scenario, you achieve a conscious phase shift. You stop reacting to insults, you remain clinical in meetings, and you no longer compete for synthetic status. The reaction, to a noisy observer, your calm is a status threat. Your lack of jealousy makes them feel inferior because they are still slaves to their alarm. The deduction, they will attempt to sting you specifically to get a reaction. They are jealous of your autonomy. If they can make you jealous or angry, they have dragged you back down to the frequency, resetting the status balance. The virtue leak, jealousy of morality. We see this often in right versus wrong culture. The scenario, someone performs a genuine act of altruism or achieves a level of self-discipline, like a strict fitness or financial goal. The reaction, instead of being inspired, observers often look for the rot. They say, they're only doing that for attention, or Must be nice to have that kind of time. The deduction. They are jealous of the discipline the other person possesses. By labeling the virtue as fake, they protect their own ego from the data that suggests they are being lazy or undisciplined. The domino effect. How it spreads. Jealousy spreads through limbic mirroring. The chain reaction. Person. A feels a status threat and emits a sting, a sarcastic comment, or a sabotage. Person B, the target, feels the sting. Their amygdala interprets this as a resource attack. The choice. If person B is unconscious, they react with their own counter-sting to reclaim status. The result, the noise in the room has now doubled. Anyone watching, person C, now feels the tension and begins to armor up, scanning for their own threats. The crabs in a bucket algorithm. In my years of business management, I've seen many examples of meta-jealousy in teams. If one person starts to consciously phase shift and become highly efficient, the rest of the team, if they are stuck in the rut, will subconsciously work together to pull that person back. It is a biological safety protocol. The group prefers shared failure, low status for all, over individual excellence, high status for one. The conscious phase shift solution. To stop the spread, you must be a circuit breaker. When you receive a sting born of someone else's jealousy, you don't return the frequency. You apply an ego feed. You identify their alarm as firing, you validate their status, I couldn't have done this without your initial input, and you effectively ground the electrical surge before it can jump to the next person. The addictive loop, the dopamine of the sting. In my decades of observing human friction, from corporate negotiations to domestic disputes, I realized that jealousy isn't just a reaction. For many, it has become an addiction. If we view the conscious phase shift as sobriety, then the unconscious state is a state of perpetual intoxication on one's own survival chemicals. The neurochemistry of the fix. The brain does not distinguish between a physical survival win and a social status win. When you identify a flaw in a rival or successfully sting someone who threatens your ego, the brain rewards you. The trigger. You encounter a data point that challenges your status, a peer's success, a beautiful stranger, a superior's praise of a colleague. The craving. Your amygdala fires, creating a painful status gap. Your brain demands a reset. The action, the hit. You find a way to devalue the threat. You gossip, you offer a backhanded compliment, or you search for the rot in their achievement. The reward. The moment you level the other person in your mind, the brain releases a burst of dopamine. For a fleeting second, the pain of the sting vanishes, replaced by a jagged sense of superiority. The tolerance buildup, the jealousy junkie. Just like any chemical dependency, the status high requires higher and higher doses to achieve the same relief. The escalation. A simple snide comment is no longer enough. The junkie begins to seek out larger conflicts, more intense outrage, and deeper acts of sabotage to keep their internal status meter from hitting zero. The withdrawal. When a person in this loop encounters someone who is truly at peace, a person in the conscious phase shift, they experience a violent withdrawal. They are jealous of that autonomy. They will attempt to infect the peaceful observer with their own noise just to feel a momentary sense of control. Marketing and the withdrawal. During my years in marketing, I've seen how they exploit this. Consumers are kept in a state of withdrawal by showing them what they don't have, then offering the product as the fix. If the consumer achieves a conscious phase shift and stops being addicted to the status chase, the marketing fails. The cycle of engineered lack. The withdrawal isn't a byproduct of marketing. For many brands, it is the primary product. By leveraging social comparison, marketing identifies a void in the consumer's life, be it status, beauty, or belonging. The deprivation state. High-end marketing works by making the consumer feel suddenly less than or behind. This creates a psychological itch, a withdrawal from the comfort of being enough. The fix. The product is then positioned as the only chemical or social compound capable of scratching that itch. Like any hit, the relief is temporary, ensuring the consumer returns when the next version or trend creates a new state of withdrawal. The threat of the conscious phase shift. The greatest threat to a consumer-driven economy is the conscious phase shift. This occurs when a consumer achieves a level of self-actualization or minimalist clarity, where their identity is no longer tied to external markers of success. When a person stops equating their self-worth with their net worth or social signaling, they become invisible to traditional marketing. They are no longer addicted to the status chase, rendering the industry's most expensive psychological triggers useless. The cooperation paradox, survival in the deficit state. The cooperation paradox occurs when the physiological need for a tribe or support system is at its peak, yet the internal survival alarm of jealousy is so loud that it actively sabotages social bonds. In an abundant state where needs are met, the brain can afford the luxury of empathy, patience, and long-term strategic planning. This is low-friction survival. However, once an individual enters the deficit state, hunger, financial instability, or housing insecurity, the limbic system undergoes a negative phase shift. The brain stops looking for partners and starts looking for competitors. The mechanical breakdown, the resource vigilance trap. When resources are low, every win for another person feels like a direct loss for you. This isn't a moral failing. It is the brain's attempt to calculate its own survival odds. The empathy offload. To save energy, a starving or stressed brain unplugs the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for complex social cooperation. It defaults to the limbic system, where jealousy and anger reside, because these emotions provide the immediate adrenaline needed for high-stakes defense. The social sabotage. Because the struggling individual is projecting a ventral shield, anger, indignation, and signaling resource jealousy, they often repel the very people or organizations who could offer a way out. The better way, breaking the paradox. The only way to move from the negative survival of jealousy to the positive survival of cooperation is a conscious phase shift. This requires the individual to manually override their biological alarm. It involves recognizing the following. Jealousy is a high-cost fuel. It keeps you alert, but it burns out your social engine. Strategic vulnerability. Admitting the need for help, the submissive position, is often the most high-status move a person can make because it creates the bridge for cooperation to begin. How to change the cycle. To achieve a conscious phase shift, you must treat your own jealousy as a withdrawal symptom. When you feel the urge to devalue someone else, you are feeling the brain's hunger for a status fix. The shift happens when you sit with that discomfort and refuse to act on it. You choose utility over the hit. You choose to be a circuit breaker rather than a conductor for the rot. Helpful combative tools. Quick grounding. In that moment of heat, you don't fight the feeling. You observe it as a technician. I am currently experiencing a chemical discharge. My brain is asking for a status fix. I am choosing to let the wave pass without a reaction. The 5-second freeze and feel. Step 1. Freeze, 1 second. Stop exactly where you are. Step 2. The drop, 2 seconds. Exhale sharply through your mouth and intentionally drop your shoulders away from your ears. Step 3. The press, 2 seconds. Press your feet firmly into the floor or your palms together and notice the exact point of pressure. This works because it forces a system override. By shifting your focus to a high-intensity physical sensation, like the pressure on the soles of your feet, you disrupt the loop of intrusive thoughts and re-engage your sensory nervous system. Other quick options. If that one doesn't click with you, try these. The temperature shock. Briefly touch something cold, a metal desk, a cold drink, or even a splash of water on your wrists. The 3-3-3 light. Quickly name 3 things you see that are the same color. The box breath. Inhale for 4 seconds, then hold for 1. That quick hold at the top acts as a tiny reset button for your heart rate. By refusing to feed the jealousy in any situation, you begin to rewire the hardware. Over time, the status alarm becomes less sensitive, and you move into a state of homeostasis, where your peace is no longer dependent on someone else's failure.